Hi, my name is Meta64 and you're watching a full HD video running at 60 FPS at a 16:9 aspect ratio, which was edited in DaVinci Resolve in Premiere Pro and then also rendered in the H.264 codec. If you do not work in video, a lot of those words probably made zero sense to you, but if you do work in video, you're probably just nodding your head and understanding. If you're in the former group, don't worry, I got bored during my video fundamentals class one time and I thought this would be a fun little video to pump out while I worked on things that have been overdue for months. So let's take a dive into each part of a video and understand how they work. But first, let's assume we're in the early age of film and video. How does this stuff work? So here's a still image of me just sitting on my screen. Here's another of me staring at the camera. Flip between them, it gives you a subtle illusion of movement. Add a bunch more and now you've got a little animation of me turning my head to look at you. Why are you in my room? If you remember Flip-O-Rama from Captain Underpants, imagine that but with a lot more pictures happening extremely quickly. In the case of Flip-O-Rama, that's a very simple version of animation, and the same quick succession of different pictures is how we watch video. The amount of times that these pictures change is called frame rate. The unified basic frame rate that a lot of films and videos use is 24 frames per second, or 24 new/subtly changed images every single second. Other media forms use different unified frame rates, like how video games usually aim for 30 to 120 frames per second. The film industry has tried to take those frame rates into their films, like with Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey from 2012, but audiences didn't really take it too well. It felt too smooth to some, not the 24 FPS most we're used to. There's a lot of moving parts to a video, and this video is here to explain as much about it as I can possibly understand before my brain starts to implode. With that said, let's jump into the most understandable parts of video, aspect ratios, video codecs, and resolutions. Wait, hold on, I'm getting Twitter notifications, just give me a second to look at this. The amount of devices that we watch media on is massive. From phones to TVs to computers, the screens that we watch stuff on have a limited amount of space to show things. I mean, there's squares and rectangles. Squares have borders. You gotta understand the relationship between the stuff you're showing on screen and the screen itself, which is where resolution and aspect ratio come in. Let's start with resolution, which is the total amount of pixels that make up an image. So for example, you're probably watching this video at full HD, which is 1920 pixels horizontally by 1080 pixels vertically. The total amount of pixels that you're looking at is 2,072,600. If you then downgrade the quality to 480p, which is 640 by 480, you'd have 307,200 pixels on screen, and so on for each resolution. The amount of pixels on screen dictates how much quality you get from a single frame of video. For example, here's a clip from one of my earliest streams, and here's a clip from my most recent at the time of this recording. One was streamed at around 360p, and the other one was shown at 1080p. Humongous difference between the two. Aspect ratios, on the other hand, dictate the shape of the square where you watch the moving images. The most common one you see is 16:9. Hey, by the way, side note, most people in the actual professional video world say this as 16:9 rather than the 16:9 that non-professionals say it as. It's 16:2 or 16:9. Anyway, this one's really common around the place since it's used for HD content ranging from 1080p to 4K. Most content is made for this aspect ratio, mainly because it's the most commonly used size for monitors, TVs, and other displays. But with the rise of TikTok in 2020 came a brand new aspect ratio that every creative was using, 9:16. 9:16 is basically just 16:9 video but flipped onto its vertical side, which gives the video a taller frame without sacrificing quality. And since phone cameras default to 9:16 when used, this ratio has become extremely popular alongside TikTok. 16:9 and 9:16 aren't the only aspect ratios that creators use online, however. Some creators screw around with all types of ratios like 4:3 and 1:1. When Vine was at the top of the short-form video world in 2016, it used 1:1, and multiple creators like Brutal Moose have used 4:3 for aesthetic purposes. Aspect ratios are an aesthetic choice to be straight from the world of HD content. If you're remaking something like from the 4:3 era, or if you're making an analog horror thing, or if you're in the content game for the fun of it, screwing around with aspect ratios in your software is something you can do. Alright, so now you have the video, you got your clips on your editing software timeline, we'll talk more about editing software later by the way, and now you're ready to go show the world. However, it's not really practical to make everyone you want to see your video grab your exact software, get your video files and audio files, arrange it the exact way you did it, and so on and so on. So you gotta render your video out into a file that most video sharing platforms accept, like MOV, MP4, or MKV. In a nutshell, you got all this footage on your timeline, and then your software will take all of this footage and shove it into a file format of your choosing for a process called encoding, which can then be dictated by the video codec that you used. For example, MP4 uses the H.264 codec, while MKV uses the AV1 format. Codec, by the way, is a portmanteau of the words encoder and decoder. In the audio and video world, they're used to both encode and decode stuff quickly, hence the name. It compresses video really small for video sites to then decompress later. Video codecs come in many shapes and sizes, and there's a wide selection of them. Out of the many codecs used online for creative works, H.264 is the most popular, used by a large majority of creators and video developers. You see this codec a lot on the internet. Most creators render in that one because it's where the MP4 file format is, and we're all creatures of habit. Sites like H.264 because of its efficiency, its low bitrate with higher resolutions, and its light bandwidth use. Creators like it for those reasons as well, especially the efficiency in rendering. Most modern GPUs that creators have in their PCs can easily render H.264 video. The same can kind of be said of our 264's brother H.265, which compresses the video a lot more but has the added benefit of keeping the quality at the same level. 265 has a wider array of colors available if the person rendering so chooses, up to 1 billion colors if mode 10 is selected. With all those benefits, you'd assume that 265 is pretty damn popular amongst creators, but it's really not. Most of the features from 265 are borrowed from its brother, and the ones it has to itself are arguably not needed if you're just making a video for YouTube, where, probably just gonna watch on their laptop or their iPhone or some other device. Additionally, not all websites support H.265, so you're better off just rendering your video in 264, which will be guaranteed to work on most websites that accept video. There are also other codecs available online like AV1 and VP9. VP9 offers more compression efficiency, allowing for higher video quality at low bit rates, and AV1 also offers better compression for quality while also saving on bandwidth. VP9 is made and maintained by Google and is supported on multiple browsers and other operating systems like Linux, Android, and iOS. Same with AV1, though it's developed by the Alliance for Open Media, a collection of semiconductor firms, video on demand providers, video content producers, software development companies, and web browser vendors. In my opinion, these are the most easy concepts in video to grasp. You can explain this to your average Joe who doesn't understand video, and they can somewhat understand it within an hour of explaining. It gets a bit more confusing from here. Let's go deeper. A significant portion of creators just starting out in either YouTubing or Twitch streaming are 100% going to download OBS for the first time, and there's a lot of settings that may not make sense the first time around. So let's try and understand what used to be my biggest hurdle when my computer wasn't the best: encoding. Encoding is a type of conversion in which files are squished down into the smallest form in order to save on the amount of data that you have to send over the internet. In a metaphorical sense, think of a video like a sleeping bag. An encoder would fold the sleeping bag down into its smallest form in order to save space. Or in my case, I have a duffel bag that folds down to be smaller when everything's in it. So bam, you've got a smaller video file, and now you've sent it to whatever video host / streaming platform you're using, and then they'll display the video. Or not. Once you've sent that encoded file, the other side has to understand what you just sent to it. It's like if someone sent me a message in a completely different language. I wouldn't know what they said until you translated it. So Twitch and other video hosting sites use what's called transcoding to turn your encoded file into a format that works for the internet. In the most simple and woke terms, it's like HRT for video. Adobe describes it in actual professional terms as a process of decoding, reformatting, and re-encoding files. An example of a transcoding program is the open source Handbrake, which I use to change video files into a different format when my video editing software doesn't want to take it. So here's a graphic I grabbed from imagekit.io that explains the whole video transcoding pipeline. The best way to imagine this is to imagine a conveyor belt with a bunch of cake ingredients. Those ingredients are your video files. An encoder will get all the ingredients into one package in order to save space on the belt, and a transcoder will take all that out, turn it into the cake, and then send it out in slices or whole to the video platform, in this case, you. Now you can eat the cake. Yummy. Now that we've made the cake, we have to understand how each part is sent, which takes us to bitrate. Let's imagine that every crumb in this cake has a specific label with a list that explains every little thing about this specific crumb. Now imagine that, but for every single crumb in this entire cake. You can't fit an entire cake into your mouth all at once, and a computer can send a whole gigabits worth of data about a video to you or towards a server in one go. It can certainly try, and you can certainly try to shove a whole cake in your mouth, but it's not going to end well for either of you. And so that is where the encoder comes in. I already explained how it works basically, but in this specific scenario, it smushes your slice really terribly, crumbs everywhere, documents everything about the crumbs of a slice, and then sends that off to the receiver/sender. So the more crumbs, bits, being sent per second to a video platform, the more information you'll get about the cake. And so, if we imagine bitrate as a constant stream of crumbs, then the higher the bitrate is, the more crumbs you're aware of in the document, which will then reform into a very detailed cake, symbolizing our finished video stream. However, the lower the bitrate, those crumbs may look less like crumbs and more like massive clumps of cake, which will reform into a not very detailed cake. Tom Scott demonstrated this in his video about how snow, confetti, and other objects like it can tank a video's bitrate and by extension its quality. Click here if you're interested in hearing his breakdown. I'm just using it here for a much clearer illustration. For streaming, imagine all the metaphors I just told you about happening all at once per second. Your GPU has to make the image, essentially making the cake, and then smush it into a billion crumbs, and then you send each crumb to Twitch's servers through a metaphorical tube, your Wi-Fi/Ethernet, alongside detailed instructions on how to remake the cake in full, and details on every single crumb of the cake. Depending on your stream quality, your GPU is either smushing less cake in qualities like 144p or 480p, or it's smushing a lot of cake for qualities like 1080p or 4K. If your cake is super detailed, your GPU can't handle the mass amount of smushing it needs to do quickly enough to send over to a server. That'll result in the encoding overloaded signal at the bottom of your OBS screen. So, now that we understand a lot more about video, let's talk editing softwares, preparation, and completion. Wow, you've recorded your video and now you've got to edit it. This segment is a little quicker since it's less about video and more about the software best used to make it. Said software is under the umbrella of an NLVE, or a non-linear video editing software, which are able to move things around on a timeline without screwing around with the rest of the project like a linear video editor would. Anyway, here's a list of editing softwares that I think are cool. Adobe's Premiere Pro is the one that a lot of people's minds jump to when the topic of video editing is coming up. It's just that guy when it comes to editing software. It's got a lot of nice features, it's got a clean interface, and most importantly, basically everyone uses it. From online creators to film studios to students to marketers. If you want to edit something, most people would suggest you use Premiere. And Adobe's entire Creative Cloud links almost perfectly with every Adobe app interchangeably. After Effects, it links to Premiere Pro, and so on. And honestly, I like Premiere. It took me a while to adapt to it after I dropped my last software, but once I got into it, it was like clockwork for me. The features it has are extremely beneficial to making content quick. You know those shorts I pumped out? I captioned all of them with the auto captioning feature in Premiere, and then I just cleaned them up. It was muscle memory for me, which was what made it super quick to get a short out basically every day. I will say though, the price of Premiere is what usually throws a lot of people off, myself originally included. Premiere on its own is $30 Canadian per month. That is a steep price. You know, it also doesn't help that the fact that the moment you purchase any Adobe software, you're charged an arm and a leg to cancel the subscription, which the US government is currently suing them for. I hope they win. But other than that, it's an alright software. Sony's Vegas Pro. Fuck this thing. Anyway, DaVinci Resolve. I've seen a massive uptick in people using this one, mainly because it's, fully free, but there's a lot more to it than that. For one, if you edit in Premiere, you can actually make Resolve have the same shortcuts and stuff from Premiere. Resolve has better color grading, it has Fusion, a full suite of tools like Adobe After Effects has to enhance your work. It has extremely good audio editing with Fairlight. It has full live collaboration with other people on the same timeline. I lost my shit at this one. And what makes me the most excited is not only just the features, but the fact that all of this is also available on the iPad. And while it was somewhat unstable when it first launched in October 2022, it got much better over time, making Resolve one of the best editing softwares on the iPad. It brought a tear to my eye. I really liked it. CapCut! Oh boy, learning about this one was a massive slap in the face to me, because for years I thought very lowly of CapCut and other mobile video editing software because they could never stack up to the real editing softwares on PC. But now I can say that, wow, these things are really, really good. And I want to emphasize that a lot. CapCut is really good, especially for short form content, and even for long form if you really want to go for that. Which makes even more sense, the short form part, when you realize that CapCut is owned by ByteDance, who owns TikTok. Additionally, this is the only editing software I've talked about today that is also available on a web browser, a scenario that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. Filmora. I haven't used this one in ages. I used it a long time ago, but I decided to re-download and re-familiarize myself with the program for this video. And honestly, this is a really user-friendly video editing software. If you gave this to an 8-year-old that's really into being a YouTuber, they can make a video they're pretty proud of pretty quickly. There's a lot of fun effects to play with, editing is quick and fast, there's some royalty-free music package with the software and stock footage, and as already mentioned, it's simple to get into and then finish a video. The price of Filmora is also another pro, as it prices itself at $50 a year, spanning across multiple devices like the iPad, Macs, iPhones, Android, and of course, PC. That is a lot of value for what is essentially $500 a decade. There's a metric ton of editing softwares out there, but these are the ones I wanted to quickly note. Some of them are free, some of them aren't, and some are open source. Here's a funky little graph showing my opinions on as many of these softwares as possible, and you can also find that on my blog. But I want to make this really clear, and I want to make sure it's extremely clear. Whatever software you use does not truly matter. You're still exporting a .mp4 file after all, so just pick the one that gives you the most features and the least trouble. To wrap this whole video up, let's quickly touch on the technology behind displaying not only video, but most types of media on your computer. We'll mainly be focusing on the video side, but just know that a good amount of the words that I'm saying here will probably apply to most other parts of displaying stuff on computers, phones, and other displays. First off, let's quickly reiterate our knowledge on frame rate. Simply put, it's the amount of times a new image is shown on screen. I used Fliporama as an easy example earlier, but you can also imagine it as a PowerPoint presentation going really fast. Frame rates are used to measure how fast many different types of moving images go, from your favorite anime short to online content. For most video, films, TV shows, and new broadcasts, and also other things, they all use 24 frames per second. Video games don't stick to that, they go for 30 to 120, and animators usually stick to 24, but in various variables like on 1s or on 2s. Online video creators experiment with multiple types of different frame rates depending on what style of content they're trying to reproduce or replicate. The YouTube channel Extra Credits actually discussed this in a video 8 years ago, but mainly on the topic of video games and game design. So, we understand that frame rates are basically the amount of times that a new image is shown, yeah? Well, the refresh rate is basically the amount of times your monitor draws a new image that's about to be shown, and the amount of times it does is measured in hertz. It's like your monitor blinking, and every time it blinks, it's showing something new. The refresh rate depends on what display you use. Most monitors have a maximum refresh rate of 60 Hz, some have a refresh rate of 120, and some use 144. So for a 144 Hz display, that's a new image being drawn 144 times per second. That's a lot. Both of these values can be skewed and changed by your computer and your monitor's ability to display those images. Your GPU has to make them, and then your monitor, through a fancy cable like HDMI or DisplayPort, has to actually display the image. Usually you want both values to be somewhat linked to one another, otherwise you'll end up with screen tearing on your monitor. In games, you can usually fix this by switching on the VSync option, which will synchronize your game's frame rate with the refresh rate of your monitor or display. For online video, like on YouTube, that type of mismatching is on the browser to handle. You can turn off hardware acceleration to fix that. And that is basically most of the surface level stuff about videos. This iceberg goes way deeper than the stuff I've discussed today. There's chroma keying and how that works, there's masking, the back end of most video sharing websites, what's going on there, how editing softwares in general work, but this is a good place to stop. For more in-depth looks into this type of video stuff, you should watch the CD Slash series by Captain Disillusion, and these videos on screen by Tom Scott. They're really good videos and I love watching them a lot. I'll leave links to them plus my sources in the description. And oh yeah, my sources for each thing I talked about today, those are on my blog now. The latest post, like went up at the same time as this video went out, should be there now, so you go check that out if you're interested. Massive thank you to Rabbit for sticking around on the Ko-Fi for now 3 months. Go to ko-fi.com/meta64/TIERS to join the fun and get some sick exclusive stuff. I will see you all pretty soon. Thank you for watching.